From the news photographs that come out of Africa, you could get the impression there is only trouble. Few people living ordinary lives, few places left of extraordinary beauty. The photographs we are about to see, however, balance the picture. They come from the camera of Chester Higgins Jr. He has been a New York Times photographer for more than 3 decades, each year taking the time to travel and bring back intimate portraits of African communities and the African diaspora. There is a mini retrospective of his work on right now, which we'll tell you about later, but first let's meet Chester Higgins. Hi, it's so great to have you on the program. I love your images.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
And let's just go right on to the first one, and then we'll talk about what we're seeing as we go. There were so many hundreds of photographs in your book, Feeling the Spirit, and this exhibit is now on at Tekserve on 23rd Street. So we're going to narrow the focus primarily to one place that you've been recently, Ethiopia. And let's start with this image. Who is this and from where exactly?
Well, I like to think that this is my Mona Lisa. It's a Surma teenager in the southern part of Ethiopia. When I go to Ethiopia, I spend 6 weeks, and 3 of them are spent camping down in the south. And I take a what I call a New York City fashion studio with lights and backdrops, and I go from village to village, and I select my visual materials, and I shoot, and I ask them what they think is a fair price to pay them, and I pay them, and we get their name, and we do it like this. And this child was just incredibly beautiful, and I just loved her countenance, and I was fascinated by how she held these heavy boar horns, and then I realized it's a strap that goes over her head. It's not something that comes out of her ears.
Let's go on to the next image. This is a couple in front of their hut.
In front of the hut that's made out of papyrus. And these people are the Abori people, also Southerners, the southern part of Ethiopia. And you notice the man is holding, all the men seem to carry these stools that are also their pillows that they sleep with at night. They keep insects from getting into their ears and the sand from getting on their hair. But during the daytime, they become their stools, and they all carry them.
Now, we'll show some more images in a minute. Tell me again, you said you pay your subjects to have their photographs taken? Because in typical photojournalism, typical New York Times policy, I would imagine, you cannot pay news subjects.
Well, 2 things. This is on my vacation.
This is on your
my personal
your day
time.
job is working for the Times. This is something you do on your own.
This is something I do on my own, and I'm not doing a story. This is something that I'm doing for myself, to discover for myself, essentially, the many different aspects of the African self that I'm not aware of. And I kind of think that it's only fair to pay them. So I budget a shooting fee. It's generally not that much. I mean, I ask people what they think is fair, and it's usually from $5 to $25. So that determines, if I get a more expensive village, it determines I have to shoot less. If I get a more inexpensive village, then I can shoot more. But the important thing, though, is that people have a chance to feel that that what they're doing is worth something.
Yes.
And I'm not coming to take, but I'm coming to also, I want to create a balance here. I'm giving as well.
And they feel that they're not exploited that way.
Absolutely.
Let's look at the next image.
And
tell us what we're seeing.
Here we're looking at a volcanic lake. Ethiopia has a lot of volcanoes. And this is a lake, and this huge sycamore tree has become a very sacred spot for the people who believe in nature. That if you read most religious beginnings, they all believe that the external world, the natural world, is a function of one great creator. And these people who feel this way, they have these gatherings at this tree, well, every day. But once a year, I went there last year, and it was 3 million people who came to this annual event, where they make a circle around this tree. They adorn the tree with butter, and they make little smoke fires at the bottom of it, and they think this is a very holy place for them.
And I love the images of the circles in this. You have a circle of people around the tree, around the smaller circle of the trunk of the tree, and the circle of the lake.
Thank you, they're echoing.
They are visually echoing each other. And we're going to go right to another image.
Now this is, Ethiopia has this incredible history. Most people don't realize it. But they have, back in the 13th century, they started to build what they call their own New Jerusalem. And in a town, in a mountain range, they went to the mountains, different mountains. There's 11 of these churches. And they drew out a footprint of what the church should look like. And then they separated the church by going down 40 feet from the top, 100 feet around. So what was left was this monolithic piece of rock that was separated from the mountain, and then they went back to that rock.
A church carved out of rock.
Carved out of rock. I mean, so you would have to call it divine sculpture, in a way. It's quite beautiful. And today, up until this day, they still use, these churches are still used by the people.
So that's what's in the bottom of the image. It's a rock church in the shape of a cross, if I'm seeing it right.
Right, because they're Orthodox people. So this is the Orthodox cross, equilateral cross. And in the church, in the pit, and then at 4 o'clock in the morning, this is what the stars will look like, because you're about 6,000 feet above sea level.
I don't think I have ever seen a starrier night. When I saw this image for the first time earlier today, it really took my breath away, that there could be any place on Earth where you can see that many stars.
Well, you know, one of the things I found attractive about the Ethiopia nighttime sky is that because of the stars being so close to you, in one feeling, you feel that you can reach up and touch them. And I sort of think, I like to call it, you're looking at the floor of heaven.
How do you work? Do you arrive in a village already knowing what you want to shoot?
Well, yes and no. I know I want to deal with people, but I don't know what the spirit is offering me, so to speak. So so the creativity has to be forefront, that I'm completely ready to pivot, ready to move based upon what's in front of me. And what's in front of me beckons me. And I follow those beckons, and that's what leads me.
How did you find this guy, and what are we really looking at on his face?
Well, these people, the Karo, have a very interesting tradition. In the morning when they bathe, they make paint from the rocks. And they paint themselves in different configurations as their daily message to the spirit. And this is at the Omo region in Ethiopia. It's a region that maybe in about 5 years will be flooded over because of one of the new dams. But these people, I went and I did the same thing I do. I go to a village, I get the elders together. So the men will sit around a circle, the women will stand, and I say, you know, that I'm here, I'd love to make photographs to show people back home who have no idea what you look like or that you exist, to show them pictures of you. And how much would you charge, and can I then select people? And then looking around for the people who I think would make great visual statements, like this young man here. I pick him out and I work with him.
And what about these girls?
Oh, these girls, I call the flashlight girls. These girls are in Mali. And this is one of the pictures used on a postcard that Tekserve produced. And the reason I call them flashlight girls, this is on a market day, and you see my backdrop and my lighting. But I noticed that all of the young women and the older women carried flashlights in the daytime. But I then discovered, my wife discovered, that they had no batteries. And then she discovered that what they were used for were pocketbooks. That this is where they carried their money.
In the flashlights?
In the flashlights.
Where'd the flashlights come from?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure. They were imported, but I know that the shoes they're wearing are Chinese. There are a lot of Chinese products flooded in.
All right, now, surprise image.
Are
we in Brooklyn?
We're on the tallest mountain outside of Addis Ababa called in Toto. And these are Ethiopian Jews who have this very unique ceremony called Sig. And Sig is made to commemorate the time that Moses went up to Sinai and received the tablets. So they make this procession up to the tallest mountain, and then the rabbi, they have their service there, and they go back. Now, it was my earlier trip in Ethiopia in '74 that I found out about Ethiopian Jews. And then coming back, I was doing some research at the Schomburg, and I saw pictures of an old picture of Ethiopian Jews in Harlem, which really made me very curious. So I started asking around, and I started locating the African American Jews who are in Harlem, who are in Brooklyn, the Bronx, what have you. But it was because of discovering them in Ethiopia that I found them here.
Now we are in New York, correct?
We are in New York and Harlem, and we're having, this is at a synagogue in Harlem called Commandment Keepers. And on the left, we have an Ethiopian, Rabbi Paris, and on the inside, we have Rabbi White at this wedding under the huppah at the Commandment Keepers congregation up in Harlem.
And we have another one from New York City.
Yes. Now here you have Rabbi Paris is in the middle, and this is a synagogue out in Brooklyn. And with, you see they have several Torahs.
So Ethiopian Jews around New York.
Ethiopian Jews around New York. And then you have here Rabbi Paris with the group up in Harlem, up in the Bronx, Mount Hebron Synagogue with a bar mitzvah ceremony. And I think there is another one. And there are more at Tekserve. We have about 10 or 12 of them that people
And that's where, tell us again, the exhibit of your work from Africa and of the diaspora all over the world.
Right. Is that, which some of it's come from my book, Feeling the Spirit. Some of it is new. But the exhibition is called My Soul Flies Home to Africa, and it's at Tekserve for 6 weeks down on 23rd Street.
That's the
119 West 2/3.
Apple Store. Tekserve.
Apple Store. If you have a macro problems like I've had over the years, a lot of my friends, that's where we go.
On West 23rd Street. Now, so we saw some of your Africa shots. We saw some particular diaspora shots from here in New York.
Right.
But you also go all over the world
Right.
and shoot people from the African diaspora.
Right.
So what do you take in very different places from here? What do you take in the Netherlands? What do you take somewhere else?
Well, when I go to the Netherlands, I'm looking at what I call the tertiary movement of the African diaspora. To explain, the primary movement is a continent, and the secondary movement is across the Atlantic Ocean. And then the tertiary movement usually is those colonies that go back to the mother capitals. So you have people from Suriname who will be going back to the Dutch colony, to Amsterdam. You would have the Francophones who would be going to Paris. And you would have the Anglophones who would be going to London. And you would have the Lusophones who would be going to Portugal. So I go and I take a look at what those communities look like and how they exist within those host cultures.
Any trips to Asia?
Not yet, but I definitely want to get to Asia.
Tell us what this image is.
This is a traditional boat that's made out of papyrus. And these are fishermen on Lake Tana. And that's a lake that empties into the Blue Nile, which begins the Nile River down to the Mediterranean. And these boats you find in some of the drawings on the ancient Egyptian tombs. It's just an incredible thing to see. Here is the baobab tree in the desert in Senegal. The locals say that this tree grows upside down because it looks like the roots are in the air. It has so few leaves. This is the Blue Nile Falls, which the Ethiopians call Tisisat.
Is that falls as high as it looks to me?
It's very high and it's very wide, and it pours out of Lake Tana and is heading down to Sudan, where it joins in Khartoum with the White Nile out of Lake Victoria and continues all the way down to Egypt and the Mediterranean. In fact, 85% of the water of the Nile that gets into Egypt comes out of this Blue Nile.
What do you learn about the African diaspora doing this year after year after year since the 1970s that really has changed over time? Anything you can put into words?
Well, first of all, I traveled to the African diaspora because I'm in search of finding out what are the many different missing pieces of myself and what they look like. And those things, the first time is always a discovery. The second time is based upon something that may happen on the first trip that makes me want to dig deeper. In the process, I see the change that I think that makes me feel more comfortable as a person, fills out those missing parts in my psyche. But I'm also looking at what the reality of the people are. And I see changes as well as stress. I've seen change for modernization. You know, Africa, up until up until the Chinese involvement, you know, Africa, the Westerners sort of looked at Africa as a wastebasket and consumers. And the Chinese had a different attitude of looking at Africa as a place to industrialize. So that industrialization and that money to industrialize the country has caused a great deal of change.
What we haven't seen, at least in the images that you brought for today, were cities. We saw a lot of countryside shots.
Well, there's a reason for that, and I have to admit, this could be my own shortcoming, but I'm a country boy. I come from a small town in Alabama of 800 people. And I just feel more comfortable. I've always felt more comfortable with small town village people. When I would go to Africa in the 70s, I would sometimes go on charter flights, and all the other Americans would go stay in the cities. And I would just do the opposite. I would strike out by myself and just go from village to village and try to make friends and live with people. And I just found that not only was I more comfortable, but I think that my experiences were more authentic, because I was able to immerse myself within families and within smaller groups, and to become a friend who happened to have a camera.
Well, once again, the exhibit called My Soul Flies Home to Africa, Images from an Ongoing Journey, is by Chester Higgins, and it is up at Tekserve on West 23rd Street through June 13th. Also on Wednesday, May 9th, he will present a slideshow and talk about the sacred rituals and religious ceremonies that he's photographed in Africa. Do you know the time of your presentation
Yes.
on the 9th?
6:30.
All right, 6:30 p.m. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's it for this week's show. We roll out a new episode Wednesday nights at 7:30, or see us anytime at cuny.tv.